Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel Montgomery. I'm here with Riley Chow and Tony Ruiz to talk about the latest episode of Mr. Robot that aired on August 24th. This was an episode of Mr. Robot without Mr. Robot or Elliot, and I don't know what it says about it, that this was one of my favorite episodes of the season, personally. We got a lot of forward momentum on F Society and Darlene's character development. You know, this is a wonderful episode submission for her, potentially, if she were to be nominated. What did you guys think of it, just generally speaking, Riley?
Yeah, it was very linear, very straightforward. Yeah, it was one of my favorites, too. It was surprising that we could go a whole episode without Elliot, so now Darlene's the only character who's been in every episode of the show. But yeah, I thought the cold open worked really well to establish these characters that we haven't really got a chance to know so far, but we needed to know for this hour to work. So I was pretty happy with it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought this was the strongest episode this season and one of the strongest in a long, long time. For all the reasons Riley just mentioned, the linear nature of the story and some really, really, I don't know if shocking is the right word, but were some really startling character developments, particularly with Darlene. And I just really liked it. And I agree with Daniel that if Carly Chaikin can get nominated, which is possible considering that this year there's 3 Game of Thrones actresses in the supporting actress race. They're not going to be there next year because Game of Thrones won't be eligible next year. I'd love to see her get a shot. And this would be a stellar submission if the submissions mattered.
Yeah, and Maggie Smith is also gone as of this year. Although they might nominate her anyway, just out of habit. but yeah, talking about Darlene, she the main story thrust of this episode is F Society trying hacking into the FBI as they did with Angela over the last couple of weeks. They get information on the FBI about this horribly invasive surveillance program called Berenstain, exposes that, and then the FBI comes after them, and then the woman whose house they've been in, who's the lawyer for Evil Corp, Susan Jacobs, played by Sandrine Holt, she returns home unexpectedly to the house they drove her out of in the season premiere episode. And this becomes kind of a moment of reckoning for Darlene, where she ends up trying to decide what to do about this woman, because she's a witness now and she can identify them, and this is not good for them. It reminded me a bit of an episode of Breaking Bad in the first season where Walter White is in a similar situation where he has to decide whether someone he's holding captive who is a liability to him, he needs to cross that line and kill this person, and Darlene makes that decision, and she crosses that line. What did you guys think about that development?
I think in Breaking Bad, Walt kind of happened on that scenario, whereas Darlene seems like she kind of orchestrated this one, and it was over very quickly, whereas Breaking Bad really tried to drive home how hard it was for Walt to make that decision. Like here, it's hard to tell if they just really poorly planned it, and they didn't plan on her coming home, but I think more likely is that Darlene, she wanted to kill her because she's had something against her for a long time.
Yeah, and that whole thing about about her having a pacemaker and them hacking her email, trying to find something to blackmail her with, and the look on Mobley's face when it's like, did you just miss that? And Darlene's like, yeah, I must have missed it. And to me, that was one of the most chilling scenes, was the fact that you really got the sense, oh my God, she planned this. I initially thought, with her like attacking Trenton and hitting the wall and possibly having a concussion or skull fracture, that they were just going to go the Walter White route. It reminded me of the season 2 episode Phoenix, where Walt finds Jesse's girlfriend and she overdoses on heroin and he can save her, but she doesn't, so he just sits there and watches her die. I thought they were going to go that route, but they went even further with it on this one, and it was really, really chilling and fascinating to watch.
It's interesting how far ahead she might have planned it, because I definitely had the sense when she goes down in there, obviously with the taser, her plan is she gives her this whole speech. I watched you on TV when I was 4, getting Evil Corp off the hook for ruining my family. That was kill moment. She was giving her I'm going to kill you, Mr. Bond kind of speech there. And so, but like, did she mean for her to come home, or I don't think she did that. I feel like when she got her in the house and she sort of was backed into a corner, she's going to be like, I can make this work, in a way that satisfied her. And the speech she gives about seeing her on TV and now being able to face her in person, it's Carly Chaikin's best moments of the series, I think, so far. And then she has another one later on the subway train where she's saying, like, I don't even feel anything. I don't feel bad about it. What did you guys think about those two scenes?
You go ahead, Tony.
It was interesting when that scene on the train started. I thought, oh, we're going to have this. At first, I thought that it could have gone wrong because typically scenes like that where somebody kind of expresses what they're, it's almost a soliloquy, even though she's, talking to the other guy. But the way it's played was so under the radar. It was so under the skin. It was so subtle and yet chilling at the same time. And to watch her really take control of the situation. I thought that entire sequence, from the death and then taking the body to the crematorium and really just her command of it, I think sets her up to really taking more. I mean, she's always kind of taken like a kind of a backseat to Elliot, and to see that character now say, no, I'm going to be in charge of this, and it's kind of the thread that thread of control kind of runs through the whole episode, I think, and she just nails it.
Yeah, it was interesting how they didn't show them kind of taking apart the body at all. They killed her, and they disposed of her, and that was it. Kept it very clean.
I wonder how much, because it seemed like a small kind of crematorium. It's obviously for pets. How much cutting was required? Because that would require cleanup, not just in terms of dismembering a body, but one of the reasons to burn the body is to sort of a no muss, no fuss body disposal. So if they had to actually make pieces in a sense, there would be a lot more to clean up. I'm not sure how much they actually did with that.
Well, just on the subway,
I'm not sure
too, they carried it so easily.
Yeah.
There was no struggle.
Well, and what was interesting, and I have to go back and watch the scene again, I don't think they cut her up at all. I mean, it seemed like they just kind of folded her into that bag, because there's a scene where they try to push the bag in with her in it, and they can't get it through, so they actually take her out. And it seemed like she was fairly intact. I mean, there's that overhead shot of them kind of pushing her in, so I'm wondering, put her up like origami and put her in the bag. I mean, it's a little detail, but again, to me, the whole thrust of that whole section was Darlene, being in charge for better or worse, and being the one to make the decisions for what's going to happen, and actually saying, no, this is what I did, and I'm going to own this. I'm not going to try and shy away from it. I'm going to own it. And it was just wonderful how cool and controlled it was, and yet still you could still see it having an effect on her.
So we've learned very much about body disposal, which is also reminiscent of Mythbusters, though of Breaking Bad. But the Mythbusters busted that myth about the acid in the bathtub and all that sort of stuff. So I think
I love how they reference that. I love how they reference the acid thing. I was like, that was my first thought, which just shows you what effect Breaking Bad has had on how we watch television.
And in this episode, Riley mentioned the teaser at the beginning. Another flashback that sort of gives us added context to how this group kind of came together, and we saw how Mobley and Trenton became a part of this team. And these are two members of the team who we've seen a lot of, but haven't gotten to know that well, just in bits and pieces here and there. And I think they're actually two of the most interesting characters because there's still room to discover with them. So what did you guys think about getting to know them a little bit better, seeing their paranoia, seeing Trenton's family life, saying, how about we move? And they're like, are you kidding me? And her having to face the decision of maybe having to leave them. How do you guys like seeing a little bit more context on them the way we've kind of gotten more context on everyone else?
Yeah, I think it's about time. I mean, so far I've kind of thought they're just dead weight or just to fill in the background because, like, I couldn't actually name anybody on the F Society team. I mean, I could tell them apart because they did such a good job of, casting people who don't look like one another. Like, there's the black guy, there's the big white guy, there's a Middle Eastern woman. There's no way that you could confuse any of them. But I didn't know anything about them, so as I said, for this episode to work, we had to be invested in their investment in F Society. So that's what that first part accomplished. And it was also just kind of a fun scene to see them flirting.
And to see the whole, to touch on something that you hear a lot of people talk about, which is iPhone versus Android. My father works for a software company, and I know, and he texted me, he's like, they're talking about something that they argue about at work all the time. I just thought every beat of that whole arc with Trenton and Mobley was so well done. I mean, and his build-up, his paranoia, which has been shown in bits and pieces throughout the season, really just boiled over to this point. And what was interesting to me was the tension that mounted with him, culminating in him saying at the subway station, what we did was just stupid. And then, of course, he gets interrogated by Grace Gummer, and for a second, you wonder, is this guy going to flip? Is he going to rat everybody out? And when he just pushes that back and says, I want a lawyer, part of you breathes a sigh of relief. And it was nice that they gave that actor something really substantial to do in this episode.
And, of course, it all led to this kind of mysterious and sinister ending where I wasn't quite sure I picked up on all the details. Trenton got a text message that seemed like it was from Mobley, maybe it wasn't, about meeting somewhere, and then Darlene sees on the Dark Army guy's laptop messages about manipulating the group and getting her where he wanted her, and so it really does feel like the axe is going to drop on the group very imminently. What did you guys think of that sort of cliffhanger towards the end there?
Well, we saw him text her, didn't we? Or did we only see her receive it?
It was hard to tell whether that happened at the same time, because he's just after the interrogation, he's kind of texting, and then he, drops the phone in the bike messenger's basket and then takes off for wherever. It was hard to tell whether that was actually meant to be within the same universe or the same time frame. But I took it as she's because I think she texts him, I've been waiting for you, and I'm going to leave pretty soon, and I think she said self-destruct in there. But I thought the cliffhanger was incredibly effective, which again, and it gives Darlene a really full arc of going, nope, I'm not done taking control yet. I'm not done. She's acting on instinct instead of talking about things. She's been really this kind of verbose, dry character, which is part of her appeal, but to see her just say, to be confronted with the situation and just act definitively, I thought that was a great way to end the episode.
Yeah, I feel like Darlene really kind of became Ms. Robot in this episode, in the sense that I'm sort of behind her. I love Elliot as a character, but in terms of a person who can lead this movement, Darlene's kind of Khaleesi on this one in this episode. She was kind of she's putting on the mask, taking responsibility. She's making the difficult decisions, and she's taking on the burden of them, even though she doesn't necessarily feel bad about what she does. And she is driving things forward in a way that when Elliot comes out, which we thought might happen this week, but obviously he's nowhere to be found this week. Maybe it'll happen next week. How he re-intersects with this group, especially now that the group is kind of threatened in this way, and potentially at cross purposes, because last week we found out that White Rose is protecting Elliot in prison, and if White Rose might also be part of orchestrating the demise of F Society, it might lead to an interesting conflict down the road.
Especially if White Rose becomes kind of like, I read something somewhere today that's suggested the idea that White Rose could kind of take on kind of a Rey role of, oh, I'm going to control everything so that Elliot can be White Rose's greatest asset. But again, White Rose is such a mysterious character that we don't know her intentions, her true intentions, or where her allegiances lie. But it certainly looks like, at least based on the teaser for next week, that all signs point to this momentum continuing, which I think is fantastic, because after a mixed early half of the season, with some individual spots of really great stuff, this is 2 episodes consistently, and there's still 4 to go, or 3 to go, that are really picking up that momentum and reminding us why this was such a good show to begin with.
Ratings are up for the 2nd week in a row.
And that's actually not surprising, given that last week when we found out where Elliot really was. I can imagine that the reports of that, the coverage of that would have sort of prompted people's curiosity who maybe had dropped out of the show for a little while. And they sort of might have peeked back in, although much to their surprise to not see Elliot at all in the episode they decide to come back into.
I was just wondering, it's like, okay, so if the ratings are picking up and the buzz is picking up, and certainly the critical buzz for these last 2 episodes has been much stronger, right during peak Emmy voting, oh wait, Elliot's not in this episode, so it doesn't really help him at all.
But poor Rami Malek. I feel bad for him. Like, if he has to go into like some sort of contract negotiation with the show at any point, he'd be like, "I am Mr. Robot. You need me." It's like, well, no, we've got Darlene here, and the ratings spiked when she took over, so he's not necessarily safe. Now,
so what do you think? What do you think? Based on where we are now, I mean, what do you think the show is going to go in next week with it looks like all signs point to Elliot being released next week and kind of being out in the world again. Where do you think that takes the story?
Was that in the previews?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I missed the preview, so I have even less to go on. But I almost wonder, because there's so much forward momentum with the story in this episode, and the Elliot part of the story is so, like, Elliot is kind of a mystery to himself, so when he's in the room trying to sort his own self out, I'm not sure how much, intense forward movement we'll get when he moves in. Like, is it just like Darlene or everyone else is trying to catch him up? It's like, okay, here's what's been going on, and this guy did that, and stop talking to yourself, Elliot. Stop talking to yourself, Elliot. That for like another 75 minutes next week. So I'm sort of hoping that this forward momentum carries Elliot along, because Elliot can be such an internal character that you sort of need outside forces to propel him, and actually that's part of what lifted season 1 so well. Was there were those external forces, like his drug dealer / girlfriend, her ordeal prompted him to sort of step up in a way, and even having to do these things and step out of his comfort zone to execute the plan in season 1 that forced him forward in a way that he hasn't been forced forward in a way, because he's literally been confined, and so he's sort of been just kind of inside his own mental state for all this time. So I really have no idea how he will reintegrate into the story after being gone for so long.
Or will he at all? I mean, 5 episodes ago, I would have thought that he would have caught up with the main characters, the rest of the cast by now. But we only have 3 weeks left, so I can see them just trying to close out his story arc with White Rose, and then maybe Darlene has her own story, and they meet up in the finale. We might go through a whole season without Elliot interacting much with the rest of the cast.
Yeah, and we haven't really talked about the one deviation from the Darlene storyline with this episode, and that would be with Angela in the bar, which on one hand I thought was a really kind of effective scene, but at the same time still kind of stuck out like a sore thumb, and it kind of reminded me of some of the stuff in season 1 with Angela, where it was just like you couldn't quite figure out what the point of this was. But what did you guys think of that whole sequence with the song and then Mark Moses' character coming in, and what did you guys think of that?
I just at the beginning of the episode, I saw Mark Moses, his name in the credits, and I thought, okay, I bet I know who he's going to play, because he's been in over 100 movies, TV shows, and he's always that same kind of slimy character. Whenever he shows up, Paul Giamatti or Jelko Ivanek, you can bet that they'll be slimy.
we need a slimy type. I want to be that guy's agent to you got slimy, I've got Mark Moses. It's good work, but I wonder how I would feel about that.
Well, I thought he was actually, it was kind of a nice scene, and her being drunk and telling him to go home to his granddaughter and then saying no, stay, and then the song, which I thought was really kind of effective. I thought that was, one of the things I keep returning to with this show is the music choices. I mean, some of my favorite moments in this show has been, its use of music and taking, popular songs and turning them on their head for a really interesting effect. I mean, taking Everybody Wants to Rule the World and turning it into this kind of sad, depressing breakdown for Angela. I was like, who would think of doing something like that?
I absolutely love Portia Doubleday's performance in that scene. I did feel like her segment of this episode was kind of, the episode needed a cutaway from the other main story, and so it was kind of her. I don't think it really didn't advance her story much, didn't really advance her character much, other than kind of showing us a little bit more of things we've already seen. We know she's ambivalent in many ways about her whole involvement in E-Corp, and but it sort of goes back and forth without much rhyme or reason, and so last week she kind of got slapped around by the people in the liability department who really kind of figured out what she was all about really quickly, and so now she's licking her wounds again. And we find out that the guy she was dating was actually kind of sent there by the FBI, and but we didn't really get much story momentum. The one thing I'm thinking about with Angela is I had a revelation watching this episode. I'm thinking she needs a flashback. We need the Angela flashback, and it can be as long as they want. It could be like a 10-minute teaser, but it can be. It just needs to show us one of two things. It needs to flash us back to her childhood, something that plants the seed of where this kind of, we were victimized in my youth and my family was, I don't want to be victimized again, so she identifies with, her victimizers, essentially, Evil Corp. Or a flashback to sort of that in-between space in season 1 where it goes from, her just being, working for this tech company to her suddenly being the corner office badass who's trying to work the system behind the scenes of Evil Corp, and we never really got a transitional moment there of what prompted that change in her. I would love to see the flashback that kind of really digs into her that moment where things changed for her and where she's going now. Because I feel like it just needs context. Because Portia Doubleday, I don't think I've said enough about. She's doing a great job this season as an actress. And it's just sort of the character is kind of adrift and uncertain, and it lacks a greater context to understand what her motivation actually is. And from week to week, it always seems to change.
I thought, the one thing that I will say, I completely agree with you about it's not really forwarding the plot and not really helping us understand what's going on or anything. The one thing that came to my mind while watching it from a thematic standpoint is that this episode is really about taking control, and Angela's whole storyline, particularly this season, has been about her asserting her control and asserting her worth. And whereas Darlene in this episode kind of takes control and is owning the consequences of that and saying, I'm going to keep taking control, Angela is kind of like, okay, yeah, really what I've done is I've sold out all the people that were suing E Corp, including my own father, and her paying an emotional price for that. So she's asserting control, but she's not really owning it. There's still a fragility to her that Darlene has been able to just kind of move past. So I liked kind of the contrasting way that they dealt with Darlene taking control and owning it, and then last week's episode was Angela really taking control, but suffering because of it. I thought that was a nice contrast, but I completely agree with you plot-wise.
Another interesting thing about this episode is seeing not just forward momentum in the story, but forward momentum in the FBI investigation. Like, oh my goodness, they're actually getting somewhere. Like, Dom has been kind of, she was suspicious of Angela, and she knew something was up there, but she couldn't really prove it. And now this episode, she's pulling in Mobley and actually questioning him. Although I thought, like, oh my goodness, she's onto them, and then she says, we really want Tyrell Wellick, and I'm just like, oh, you're still kind of off. You're a little off target there. Well, so what do you guys think about the investigation and how Dom is progressing?
I don't know, that's good. It's good to have a forward momentum in the plot. I mean, Angela is, like, she showed up this week, but they didn't have anything for her to do, so that was pretty boring.
I think the one thing, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, but it's like when Dom says, we still want, what we want is Tyrell Wellick, so do I. I want, I've never seen somebody in the main credits who's been in so little of this season, and I'm sure they're going to answer that question at some point, but the suspense is killing me because I want that character back.
Well, it's not just that he's in the main credits, it's that, like, normally when somebody leaves for a period of time, like, where they've gone and that they'll come back in a big way later. Whereas I feel like with him, at some point, they might just, like, pan over to a ditch, and there he is lying there, and it's like, oh, okay, well, that's what happened to him. Like, there's so much uncertainty about how much this will be resolved, I find.
Yeah, I do think it's not so much the mysteries that they're raising, but the delayed pace with which they're paying them off. So we had the prison reveal of Elliot for last week, which was 7 weeks of waiting to find out where he actually was and knowing that there was something up there. And that's the same thing with sort of Wellick. In case of Wellick, it kind of reminds me of this past season on The Walking Dead, the sort of the fake-out death of Glenn mid-season, where they sort of killed him off, but then they're like, oh, maybe we didn't, and so they kept dragging it out for week after week, wondering where this guy was. So when he turned out to be alive, it was just like, okay, so you just kind of screwed us around to tell us he didn't die. So I feel like they have kind of strung this along as much as is dramatically effective. I don't really know how much more drama there is in wondering where Tyrell Wellick is, and without a big step forward in terms of a clue or sighting or some kind of revelation. It doesn't even have to be Wellick showing up. It just needs to be some kind of moment that progresses that mystery in a way that hasn't up to this point.
Like, he's called him on the phone. It always sounds like he's in kind of a tough spot. So at this point, I'm just kind of thinking, like, oh, it's been weeks, you know, like, is he even getting enough food and water wherever he is?
He's in a giant camp. With Alf, of course.
With Alf, yes. We have to make our weekly Alf reference, yes.
I kind of wonder if he's just, like, chilling with White Rose somewhere, you know. I mean, he is somewhere important. Obviously, he's somewhere important. I don't think they're going to pan over to him in a ditch because, you know, if they're going to hold out on this revelation for as long, it's going to be big, like the prison reveal last week. It's going to be something that's very transformative to the story, to at least the nature of it. It's just a matter of getting there that is taking quite a long time. Was there anything else about this episode specifically that either of you noticed or wanted to point out, for better or worse, that we haven't discussed yet?
Not really. I mean, the great thing about a straightforward kind of linear episode like this that really only has the one really main plot and everything developing with that is that there's less mystery, and you know, sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes, you know, mystery can be if you give an audience too much mystery, it seems like they're toying with you, and I know we've certainly had that complaint throughout. I'm just watching the teaser for next week. There seems to be some. It seems like the stakes are going to get high, and we're going to get a lot of Philip Price in the next episode. So I'm really. By the way, this episode was written by Courtney Looney, who hasn't written an episode for Mr. Robot before. So good on you, Courtney. You wrote the best episode of the season so far.
We speculated last week about what would happen next year with Sam Esmail, whether he would continue to do all the directing, that kind of thing. So I was trying to find examples of shows where showrunners took on more control. I can find several the other way, like with Fargo and Curb Your Enthusiasm, Louis, True Detective, Penny Dreadful. They're all shows that started out with one writer, and then he hired more writers as the series went on. The only thing that's kind of like Mr. Robot is Downton Abbey, which started with 3 writers and then was just 1 after the first season. So
it's kind of hard to imagine one writer and director at this point doing, you know, both. I mean, yeah, Downton Abbey had Julian Fellowes writing basically the whole thing, but it had different directors over the, you know, Fellowes didn't direct the show, so having that much control, you know, and the fact that this episode was written by a first-time writer, or at least a first-time writer for this show, kind of shows that having different voices in the room might be very beneficial to this show creatively. So I would love to see more of that, you know, especially if we get more episodes like this one. So any thoughts for any additional hopes for next week?
I'm going to say it until it happens. Give me my Tyrell Wellick back.
Do you guys have any new thoughts about the Emmys? Like, I noticed that Mr. Robot, it won the Writers Guild Award for New Series. So every winner that's of that award has actually won something at the Emmys, except for the very first winner of that award, which was Grey's Anatomy. And all of them, except for girls, have actually won in a major category, too. So I'm actually not predicting Mr. Robot for anything. You can kind of blame the new system for that, because I think under the old system it would be a lock for writing. But, you know, the Writers Guild New Series Award is a popular vote. The Emmys are a popular vote now. Theoretically, it should be winning something. I just don't see it clicking anywhere.
What do you have winning writing?
Game of Thrones.
Mm.
Yeah, so do I. Under the old system, I would have predicted Mr. Robot for writing. They love pilot episodes, and Mr. Robot is such a writer-driven show, as we've seen this year, for better and worse. But last year, certainly for the better, especially in that pilot episode. But yeah, last year, the fact that The fact that Mother's Mercy, Game of Thrones, won writing last year over the finale of Mad Men, and it was just part of that giant Game of Thrones steamroller, it makes me feel like this is a much more sweep inclined system. So, I mean, if Game of Thrones is as far ahead for drama series as it was last year, which I think it is, if not even more so, because it doesn't even have the sentimental favorite Mad Men to face this year. So it feels like a sweep, even though Battle of the Bastards wasn't really a writing-heavy episode, at least not in terms of the takeaway from that episode. But yeah, I'm going to predict Game of Thrones because it feels like a sweep. It just does.
Yeah, I'm not ready to predict Battle of the Bastards to win writing yet. I'm still kind of sticking with Mr. Robots just for the reason that, because it's airing right now and it's peaking. Its best episode was last night. Its most talked about episode, where it's out there in the blogosphere, was last week. I just feel like they're going to give it something, and it's either going to be. I can't imagine that the show's going to go home empty-handed.
I can't.
So I'm still sticking with Malek and Best Actor. So.
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily will go home empty-handed, but I don't think that the Television Academy is going to have any qualms about sitting at home empty-handed. It's like, I don't know. I mean, and it's different branches. All the branches vote for series, but it only has the one acting nomination. So the actors branch is deciding on Malek. It has the one writing and the one not even directing, the one writing nomination. So the writers branch is going to decide on that one. So I mean, I can envision all of those groups going with Kevin Spacey for the name recognition and the popularity factor, and going with Game of Thrones just because it wins everything. It's unlucky in that of the 6 nominations it has, it doesn't have a slam dunk win. This is where you go for Mr. Robot. It has several possible. It has it could win. It could win Malek. It could win. It could win for writing. It could win in creative arts. But I win the way empty-handed.
Yeah, I think that's probably its best. I think probably its best bet is the creative arts. Riley, what is it nominated for in creative arts?
It's got sound, it's got score, and casting. I think that might be it.
Wow. Not cinematography? Jeez. Are they blind?
Not editing either. It's really kind of baffling. These I used to get excited about creative arts because these groups used to be like, that's where you would see a nomination here for Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a 2-time Emmy-winning show, and these other shows would get in. Nowadays, I just feel like the shows that they're already watching that are going to get the big nominations, 9 times out of 10, that's what they're going to nominate. What that peer group is going to nominate in the creative arts races, and so you don't get as much variance in the creative arts categories as I think we used to.
Yeah, I actually did an article about that recently where this was actually the most diverse set of creative arts nominees we've had in 5 years, but still, most of it is just going to the series nominees over and over again.
Yeah, I think I'm still just having a hard time adjusting my brain to the new Emmy voting system, and we'll see what happens between. I've still got a few weeks to come to my senses.
Well, I think Emmy voters are still adjusting to it as well. This year is gonna be exciting because it's gonna tell us a lot, not just about Mr. Robot, but about the Emmys. In that, last year was our first data set. This year is where we can start to see not necessarily trends, because 2 years is still too small a sample size to identify trends specifically. A third year might tell us something very specific about trends, but we could sort of see a direction. If they veer completely different from what we're thinking about cynically, they're just going to vote for all the same repeats again. That could be interesting. If they vote for everyone the same again, that could be interesting. If it's sort of a mix, that could be interesting. But we'll have definitely more data to mine after September.
And scream about.
Oh, well, of course. That's just what we do.
Something I could see happening is the show could win writing this year, and then never be nominated again. Kind of like Modern Family, like with Homeland, because that writer's branch is like more fickle than any of the other ones. Like if you have kind of a weak season from a critical perspective, then they just drop you and they don't bring you back unless it's your series finale.
Yeah, I do love the writers' branch, though. They're usually the best, which is why I'm holding out hope. They only have that one category they can decide on Mr. Robot, so they can decide, like, we really like Mr. Robot, and Game of Thrones is going to win everything else. And Game of Thrones, the top achievement of Battle of the Bastards, isn't necessarily its script. Maybe they do go for Mr. Robot. It's definitely probably between those two. So I've got my fingers crossed for that Mr. Robot pilot. Well, with that, let's conclude this edition of Talking Mr. Robot, or whatever this recap show is. And thank you, Tony. Thank you, Riley, for joining me. And everyone, we will see you back next week.